My wife turned our marriage into a corporate control system. But when I refused to be her employee, her plan collapsed, and I took back my freedom. Not a different. The kind of different that makes your gut twist because you can smell trouble brewing from a mile away. She was sitting at our dining table with papers scattered everywhere, like she was running some kind of corporate merger. Her laptop was open. There were colored pens lined up like surgical instruments. And she had that look. You know the one, that gleaming, overly excited expression that women get when they think they've figured out how to fix your entire life without asking if it needed fixing. Honey, you're home. Perfect timing. She practically bounced out of her chair. I have something incredible to show you. I've been working on this all day, and I think it's going to change everything for us. I set my keys down slowly, already sensing where this was headed. 3 years of marriage teaches you to read the warning signs, the excessive enthusiasm, the assumption that whatever she cooked up in her head automatically became our shared reality, the complete disregard for the fact that maybe, just maybe, I might have my own thoughts on the matter. I've created a system, she announced, gesturing toward her paper fortress like she was unveiling the cure for cancer. A complete organizational framework that's going to optimize how we handle everything: finances, household responsibilities, personal time management, even our social calendar. Everything. I walked closer and saw what she'd been busy with: spreadsheets, color-coded charts, detailed schedules broken down by the hour, lists upon lists of rules, procedures, and protocols. My name appeared everywhere, but interestingly enough, her name seemed to be missing from most of the actual work columns. Look at this, she continued, pointing to a massive flowchart. I've researched how the most successful couples operate, and they all have systems, structure, clear expectations, and accountability measures. Accountability measures. She actually said that with a straight face. I picked up one of the sheets. It was titled Daily Reporting Requirements and included sections for expense tracking, time allocation, justification, and something called productivity metrics. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, it specified that all reports needed to be submitted by 9 p.m. each evening. You want me to file daily reports? I said, not as a question. Think of it as communication enhancement, she replied quickly. So we're both always on the same page about our resources and priorities. Our resources. Funny how my paycheck suddenly became our resources, but this system she spent all day creating was apparently something I needed to gratefully adopt. I kept reading. There were sections about pre-approved social activities and budget consultation requirements for any purchase over $50. $50, the same amount I used to spend on lunch without thinking twice, now required a formal discussion. And this part here, she said, flipping to another page with barely contained excitement. This is where we track personal development goals and implementation timelines. I've already identified several areas where we can improve efficiency. Translation, areas where she decided I was doing things wrong. The more I looked at this elaborate production, the clearer it became what I was really staring at. This wasn't a system. It was a management structure with her as the manager and me as the employee who somehow forgot he never applied for the position. She had charts showing how my free time should be allocated, specific time slots for hobbies, exercise, and something called relationship maintenance activities. My weekends were blocked out in 30-minute increments. My evenings had designated purposes. Even my Saturday morning routine was itemized and optimized. I know it looks like a lot, she said, misreading my silence as overwhelm instead of recognition. But once we implement this, everything will run so much smoother. No more confusion about who's supposed to do what. No more miscommunication about spending. No more inefficient use of our time together. No more freedom to make my own decisions. How long did you spend on this? I asked. About 3 hours. But it was so worth it. I kept thinking about how much stress this is going to eliminate once we get it running properly. 3 hours. She spent 3 hours designing a comprehensive control system for my life and somehow convinced herself it was a gift to our relationship. I set the papers down and looked at her. Really looked at her. The excitement in her eyes wasn't about us. It wasn't about making things better. It was about the power she thought she was about to gain, the control she was trying to establish, the authority she was attempting to claim over every aspect of my daily existence. So, she said, clasping her hands together, what do you think? When should we start implementing phase 1? Phase 1? Of course there were phases. I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words were going to determine how the rest of this marriage played out, because this wasn't really about organization or efficiency or communication enhancement. This was about whether I was going to allow myself to be managed like a child in my own home. And that answer was pretty simple. She launched into the details without waiting for my response, which told me everything I needed to know about how much my opinion actually mattered in this grand plan of hers. Phase 1 starts with the financial transparency module, she explained, pulling out a thick folder. Every purchase, every transaction, every financial decision gets logged here. I've created categories for necessities, discretionary spending, and what I'm calling consultation-required items. She opened the folder to reveal more charts, income tracking, expense monitoring, and something that made my blood pressure spike. A section labeled Allowance Allocations. Allowance? I asked. Well, not allowance exactly, she backpedaled. But not by much. More like predetermined spending limits for personal expenses. It prevents impulse purchases and ensures we're both being responsible with our money. Our money again. Funny how my 40-hour workweek suddenly became our collaborative effort. Look at this section, she continued, flipping pages like she was giving a boardroom presentation. Daily schedule optimization. I've analyzed your current routine and identified at least 2 hours of wasted time that we can redirect toward more productive activities. Wasted time. My morning coffee ritual was apparently wasted time. My evening routine of unwinding with a book was inefficient. My Saturday afternoon habit of working in the garage was categorized as low-value activity. And here's my favorite part, she said, her voice getting that sing-song quality that made my teeth clench. The communication protocols. Instead of those random conversations that go nowhere, we'll have structured check-ins, daily briefings, weekly reviews, and monthly planning sessions. Daily briefings. She wanted to turn our marriage into a corporate hierarchy where she held all the management positions. I've also included a section on social calendar management, she went on, oblivious to the fact that I hadn't said a word in 5 minutes. Friend visits, family obligations, social events, everything gets approved through the system first. No more double booking or conflicts. Approved. She actually used the word approved when talking about my social life. I picked up another sheet that caught my eye. Household responsibility matrix with my name listed under categories like kitchen maintenance, bathroom sanitation, and groundskeeping. Her name appeared primarily under system administration and quality control. You've assigned yourself as quality control, I observed. Someone needs to ensure standards are maintained, she replied without a hint of irony. I'm just naturally better at seeing the big picture and managing details. Naturally better, right? The more she explained, the more obvious it became that this wasn't about partnership or efficiency. This was about control wrapped in productivity language. She wanted to manage me like I was her subordinate, and she expected me to be grateful for the privilege. Now, I know this might seem overwhelming at first, she said, finally pausing long enough to gauge my reaction. But I've read extensively about this approach. The most successful couples have clear structures and defined roles. No ambiguity, no confusion, just smooth operation. Where exactly did you read about this, I asked. Several places. There are forums online, relationship blogs, even some books about optimizing partnerships. The common thread is that someone needs to take the lead on organization. And let's be honest, I'm better suited for that role. Better suited based on what exactly? Her ability to spend 3 hours creating elaborate control mechanisms without consulting the person who'd be most affected by them. I've even thought ahead to implementation challenges, she continued, pulling out yet another document. I know change can be difficult, so I've created a transition timeline with built-in adjustment periods and feedback loops. Feedback loops? She was talking about our marriage like it was a business process that needed optimization. The key is consistency, she explained, pointing to a calendar filled with color-coded obligations. Once we establish the routine, it becomes second nature. No more decision fatigue, no more inefficiencies. Just a well-oiled system that works for both of us. Except one of us designed the entire system without input from the other, and one of us was expected to follow orders from the other. So when do we start? She asked, looking at me expectantly. I was thinking tomorrow morning with the new routine schedule, and we can implement the financial tracking immediately. She wasn't asking when we should start. She was asking when I would start complying with her predetermined plan for my life. I looked at her sitting there, surrounded by her charts and schedules and control mechanisms, completely convinced that she was doing something beneficial. The scariest part wasn't that she'd created this elaborate system. The scariest part was that she genuinely believed I should be thanking her for it. You seem quiet, she said, and for the first time I detected a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Are you processing all the information? I know it's a lot to take in. Processing? Yeah, I was processing. All right, I was processing the fact that my wife had just spent 3 hours figuring out how to micromanage every aspect of my existence, and somehow convinced herself it was an act of love. I was processing the realization that she saw me not as an equal partner, but as a resource that needed better management. Most importantly, I was processing exactly how I was going to respond to this attempt at domestic tyranny disguised as relationship improvement. Before I could even begin to process how to respond to her management proposal, she dropped the real bombshell. Actually, I should mention that I've already started implementing some of the preliminary steps, she said casually, like she was mentioning the weather, just to get us ahead of the curve. Already started, without consulting me, without asking permission, without any discussion whatsoever. What exactly have you already started? I asked, keeping my voice level despite the warning bells going off in my head. Well, I reorganized your office space for better efficiency, she began, ticking items off on her fingers. I also consolidated your tools in the garage according to frequency of use, and I streamlined your closet by removing items that don't align with our image goals. My office, my garage, my closet. She'd gone through my personal spaces and rearranged them according to her vision of how my life should be organized. I walked toward my home office, and sure enough, everything had been moved. My desk setup was completely different. Books I kept within reach were now filed away in alphabetical order. My project notes were in organized and labeled folders, instead of my usual system of organized chaos that actually worked for me. I know it looks different, she called after me, but I researched optimal workspace configurations. This setup will increase your productivity by at least 20%. Increase my productivity. She'd made my workspace unusable and convinced herself she was doing me a favor. I opened my desk drawers. Everything reorganized, pens in one compartment, paper clips in another, everything in neat little sections that bore no resemblance to how I actually worked. She'd taken a space where I knew where everything was and turned it into someone else's idea of organization. And look, she said, appearing beside me with that same excited expression, I created an inventory sheet so you always know exactly what supplies you have available. An inventory sheet for my own office supplies. I headed to the garage next, already knowing what I'd find. My tools, which I'd arranged based on projects and frequency of use, were now organized by size and type. My workbench, which was set up exactly how I liked it, had been cleared and reconfigured. Half my current projects had been boxed up and labeled incomplete initiatives. I know the garage looks sparse now, she explained, following me. But I cleared out all the clutter and created designated zones. Much more efficient use of space. Clutter. She called my ongoing projects clutter. But it was my closet that really drove the point home. She hadn't just reorganized it, she'd edited it. Shirts I liked were gone. Casual clothes I wore regularly had disappeared. What remained was a curated selection that looked like someone else's wardrobe. Where are my clothes? I asked. I donated the items that didn't fit our image goals, she replied matter-of-factly. Clothes that were too casual, outdated, or didn't project the right message. I kept a detailed list of what was removed and why, so you can see the reasoning behind each decision. She had a detailed list of my clothes that she'd given away without asking. You gave away my clothes without asking me. I knew you'd be resistant to change, she said, that hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. But trust me, what's left creates a much more cohesive and professional image. I even researched color palettes that work best with your complexion. Resistant to change. That's what she called having an opinion about my own belongings. I walked back to the dining table where her system was still spread out like battle plans. Now I understood what I was really looking at. This wasn't a system she wanted to implement. This was documentation of changes she'd already made unilaterally. What else? I asked. What do you mean? What else have you already changed without discussing it with me? She hesitated, which told me there was more. I may have canceled a few of your upcoming commitments that conflicted with our optimization goals. Which commitments? Your poker night with the guys next week. That weekend fishing trip with your brother next month. The auto show you mentioned wanting to attend. She rattled them off like she was reading from a grocery list. I looked at your calendar and realized these activities weren't adding value to our relationship or your personal development. She'd canceled my plans, my social commitments, my time with my brother. You canceled my fishing trip with my brother. I rescheduled it for a time that works better with our new system, she corrected. I left him a message explaining that you had prior commitments to relationship-building activities. She'd called my brother to cancel plans I'd made, using words I'd never say. And I took the liberty of setting up your new bank account notifications, she continued, apparently interpreting my silence as permission to keep going. Now all your transactions get sent to both of us so we can track spending patterns in real time. My bank account, she'd changed settings on my personal bank account. The full scope of what she'd done was starting to sink in. While I was at work, she'd systematically taken control of my personal spaces, my belongings, my social calendar, and my financial privacy, all under the guise of implementing a system I'd never agreed to. I can see you're overwhelmed, she said, misreading my stunned silence. But once you experience how much smoother everything runs, you'll appreciate the proactive approach. Proactive approach. She'd invaded every aspect of my personal life and called it proactive. The beauty of the system, she went on, is that it eliminates the need for all those time-consuming discussions about every little decision. I handle the research and planning, and you benefit from the optimized results. Time-consuming discussions. She meant conversations. She meant my input. She meant treating me like an equal partner instead of a project to be managed. Standing there looking at what remained of my reorganized life, I realized this wasn't about efficiency or optimization or any of the buzzwords she kept using. This was about power. She wanted to be in charge, and she'd spent 3 hours figuring out how to make that happen while making it sound like she was doing me a favor. But what really struck me was the assumption underlying everything she'd done. She'd assumed I would just accept it. She'd assumed that once presented with her fait accompli, I'd gratefully submit to her management system. That was her first mistake. I walked back to that dining table covered in her elaborate control scheme and made a decision that was going to change everything between us. Not the kind of change she had in mind, but the kind that happens when someone finally decides they've had enough. We need to talk, I said, and something in my tone made her stop shuffling through her papers. Of course. I'm glad you're ready to discuss implementation details, she replied, completely missing the shift in the room's atmosphere. No, we're not discussing implementation. We're discussing the fact that you've lost your mind if you think I'm going to live like this. The smile faltered on her face. Like what? Like a subordinate in my own house. Like someone who needs your permission to spend his own money, see his own friends, or arrange his own belongings. That's not what this is about, she said, but her voice had lost that confident edge. This is about optimization, and this is about control, I interrupted. You spent 3 hours figuring out how to micromanage every aspect of my life. Then you started implementing, without asking me. You went through my personal spaces, threw away my belongings, canceled my plans, and changed my bank settings, all without a single conversation about whether I wanted any of this. I was being proactive, she said, but now it sounded defensive instead of proud. You were being controlling. There's a difference. She straightened up in her chair, and I could see her switching tactics. I researched this extensively. Successful couples have clear systems and defined roles. Someone needs to take leadership on organization, and you appointed yourself as that someone. I'm naturally better at this kind of thing. Better at what? Making unilateral decisions about other people's lives? Because yeah, you seem to have that covered. The room went quiet for a moment. She was processing the fact that I wasn't grateful for her efforts, that I wasn't impressed by her research or her charts or her 3 hours of planning my future without me. I don't understand why you're being so resistant, she finally said. This system would benefit both of us. How exactly does it benefit me to have you manage my social calendar like I'm incapable of making my own plans? Because you double book sometimes, and so I double book sometimes. That's my mistake to make and my problem to solve. Not yours to prevent by taking control of my calendar. But if we coordinate better, we coordinate by talking to each other, not by you implementing a management system where you're the manager and I'm the managed. She was starting to realize this conversation wasn't going the way she'd expected. You're making this sound more controlling than it is. Am I? You want me to file daily reports? You want final approval on my purchases? You've already rearranged my personal spaces and canceled my social commitments. How is that not controlling? Those are just organizational improvements. Those are power grabs disguised as improvements. She stood up, and I could see her getting genuinely upset for the first time. I spent hours working on this. I researched best practices. I created comprehensive solutions. I even started implementing preliminary steps to save us time. And instead of appreciating the effort, you're attacking my motives. Your motives are exactly what I'm questioning. You didn't create solutions. You created a system where you get to make decisions about my life, and I get to follow your rules. That's not fair. What's not fair is you assuming I just go along with being managed like a child in my own home. I never said you were a child. You didn't have to. Your actions said it loud and clear. Adults don't need other adults to organize their closets for them. They don't need permission to see their friends or approval to buy lunch. They don't need daily reporting requirements or productivity metrics. She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to reframe the conversation. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We could modify the system, make it more collaborative. There's not going to be a system. What do you mean? I'm not participating in any version of this. Not the collaborative version, not the modified version, not the pilot program version, none of it. But we need some kind of structure. We need to function like equals. We need to make decisions together through actual conversations, not through your management protocols. So what? We just go back to the old way with all the inefficiencies and miscommunications? We go back to being married adults who respect each other enough to have discussions before making major changes to each other's lives. She sat back down heavily in her chair, staring at all her papers like they were evidence of wasted effort instead of a comprehensive plan for domestic control. I don't understand why you won't even try it, she said quietly. Because I'm not your employee. I'm your husband. And if you can't see the difference between those two things, we have bigger problems than organizational systems. The silence stretched between us. She was realizing that her elaborate plan wasn't just being rejected, it was being completely dismantled. All her research, all her preparation, all her proactive implementation was being undone by 3 simple words: no thanks, honey. So what happens now? She asked. Now, you're going to help me put my office back the way it was. You're going to call my brother and apologize for canceling plans you had no authority to cancel. You're going to reverse whatever you did to my bank account, and we were going to have a long conversation about boundaries and respect. And if I don't want to do all that, I looked at her sitting there, surrounded by her control schemes, still trying to negotiate from a position of imaginary authority. Then you'll find out what happens when someone tries to manage a man who refuses to be managed. I thought that conversation would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with text messages. First one was from my mother-in-law, then my sister-in-law, then her best friend. All variations of the same theme, expressing concern about how I was handling the improvements my wife was trying to make to our relationship. My wife had gone nuclear. Instead of accepting that her management system was dead on arrival, she decided to recruit reinforcements. Your mother called me this morning, she said over coffee. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. She's worried that you're being inflexible about positive changes. You called my mother. I called several people, actually. I wanted to get some perspective on whether my approach was really as unreasonable as you made it sound. Several people. She turned our private disagreement into a public campaign. I also talked to my sister, my mom, and a few friends. The consensus is pretty clear. You're being resistant to growth. Resistant to growth. That was the spin she'd put on it. I wasn't rejecting her attempt to control my life. I was resisting growth. What exactly did you tell them? The truth. That I spent time creating a system to help us be more organized and efficient, and that you rejected it without even trying it. The truth. Interesting how her version of the truth managed to leave out the part where she'd already started implementing her system without my consent. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from her brother suggesting we grab lunch so he could help me see the bigger picture. You need to call these people back and tell them the real story, I said. I told them the real story. You're the one who's making this into something it isn't. The real story is that you tried to turn me into your subordinate and got upset when I said no. The real story is that I tried to improve our relationship, and you shut it down without any discussion. Without any discussion. She'd apparently forgotten the part where she made unilateral changes to my personal spaces, belongings, and commitments before ever mentioning her system to me. But I could see what she was doing. She was rewriting the narrative. In her version, she was the thoughtful wife trying to help, and I was the stubborn husband who wouldn't even consider her ideas. My phone rang. Her mother. Are you going to answer that? She asked. No. And you're going to call her back and tell her this is between us? She's just concerned. Everyone is. They all think you should at least try the system before rejecting it. Everyone. She'd managed to turn our private conflict into a family referendum on my character. The calls and texts continued throughout the day. Her friends, my friends, family members from both sides, all with the same basic message. Maybe I should be more open to my wife's suggestions. By evening, I realized what she'd done was actually brilliant in its manipulation. She'd framed herself as the reasonable party trying to improve things and me as the inflexible partner who wouldn't even discuss solutions. She'd turned my refusal to be managed into evidence that I was the problem. "This is what happens when you don't communicate effectively," she said over dinner, gesturing toward my phone, which had been buzzing all day. "People get concerned about the dynamics in our relationship. People got concerned because you gave them a carefully edited version of what happened. I gave them the facts. You gave them your interpretation of the facts. Did you mention that you'd already started rearranging my belongings without asking? Did you tell them you canceled my plans with my brother? Did you explain that your system included daily reporting requirements and spending approvals?" I explained that I was trying to create better organization and structure. "Right. You left out all the parts that make you look controlling. I'm not controlling. I'm proactive." There it was again. The magic word that transformed invasive behavior into virtuous initiative. My phone rang again. This time it was my own brother. "You should probably take that one," she said with a slight smile. I answered. My brother's voice was concerned but diplomatic. "Hey, I got a call from your wife earlier. She said you weren't comfortable with the fishing trip anymore, and that you had some relationship priorities to work on." She said, "What? Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but if you need to cancel, just tell me straight. Don't have her make excuses for you." I looked at my wife, who was suddenly very interested in her dinner. I never wanted to cancel. She canceled without asking me. "Wait, what? It's complicated. Can I call you back later?" After I hung up, I turned to her. "You told my brother I wasn't comfortable with our fishing trip. I told him you had relationship priorities to work on, which is true." "No. What's true is that you canceled my plans without my permission and then lied about why." "I didn't lie. I just framed it in a way that avoided unnecessary conflict." Framed it, avoided conflict. She had an excuse for everything, but I was starting to understand her strategy. She wasn't just trying to control me directly anymore. She was trying to create social pressure that would force me to comply. She'd recruited our entire social network to make me the unreasonable one for refusing to be managed. It was actually impressive in its sophistication. Instead of arguing with me directly, she positioned herself as the victim of my inflexibility and enlisted everyone we knew to convince me I was wrong. The problem with her strategy was that it revealed something important about her character. She wasn't interested in resolving our conflict. She was interested in winning it, and she was willing to manipulate our friends and family to do it. That changed everything, because now this wasn't just about her trying to control me. It was about her trying to damage my relationships with other people to get her way. And that crossed a line I didn't even know existed until she stepped over it. The next morning, I made a decision that was going to end this manipulation campaign once and for all. I called everyone, every single person she'd contacted, my mother, her mother, both our siblings, her friends, my friends. Everyone who'd received her carefully crafted version of events. "I need to clarify something," I told each of them. My wife didn't just suggest a system for organization. She spent 3 hours creating a management structure where I'd need her approval for purchases, file daily reports, and follow a schedule she created. Then she implemented parts of it without asking, rearranging my personal spaces, canceling my commitments, and changing my bank settings. The conversations were enlightening. Once people heard the full story, their tune changed completely. "Wait, she went through your stuff without asking?" my sister-in-law asked. "She canceled your plans with your brother?" my mother said. "Daily reports like you're her employee?" her best friend asked. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing again, but this time the messages were different. People were calling to apologize for misunderstanding the situation. Several mentioned they'd found my wife's initial description a little odd but hadn't wanted to get involved. When my wife came home from work, I was sitting at the dining table with all her system papers neatly stacked in front of me. "We need to finish our conversation," I said. She looked around, probably noticing that her phone hadn't been buzzing with supportive messages all day like it had been the day before. "I talked to everyone you called," I told her. "Gave them the complete story this time. Funny how their opinions changed once they understood what your system actually involved." Her face went pale. "You had no right to—" "I had every right to correct the lies you told about our situation. I didn't lie. You told my brother I wasn't comfortable with our fishing trip. You told your mother I was being inflexible about positive changes. You told everyone I rejected your ideas without discussion while leaving out that you'd already started implementing those ideas without my consent." She sat down across from me, and I could see her realizing that her social pressure campaign had backfired completely. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to call every person you involved in our private business and apologize for misrepresenting the situation. You're going to restore my bank account settings, put my belongings back where they belong, and confirm with my brother that our fishing trip is back on. And if I don't, Then you'll discover what it's like to be married to someone who doesn't respect boundaries or value your input. Because that's apparently the kind of marriage you think we should have." The silence stretched between us. She was finally understanding that her elaborate control scheme hadn't just failed. It had revealed exactly who she was willing to become to get her way. "I was trying to help," she said quietly. "No, you were trying to control. And when I said no, you tried to manipulate our entire social network to pressure me into compliance. That's not helping. That's psychological warfare." She looked at her papers scattered across the table. 3 hours of planning, days of implementation, and a full-scale social manipulation campaign, all undone because she made one fundamental miscalculation. She thought I was the kind of man who could be managed. "I don't want to be married to someone who sees me as a project to be optimized," I said. "I want to be married to someone who sees me as an equal partner to be respected. If you can't tell the difference between those two things, then we don't have a marriage worth saving." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I'll make the calls." "Good. And one more thing." She looked up. "If you ever try to manipulate me or our relationships like this again, there won't be a conversation. There won't be a negotiation. There will just be consequences you didn't see coming." 3 hours. That's how long it took her to design a system for controlling my life. 3 seconds was all it took me to shut it down. But the real lesson wasn't about time management or organizational systems. It was about recognizing when someone stops seeing you as a partner and starts seeing you as something to be managed, and knowing exactly how to respond when they do. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.